When bullets failed, flame answered. The sulfur stench of Iwo Jima's black sand filled my nostrils, and as I crouched behind a jagged chunk of volcanic rock, my M2-2 flamethrower strapped to my back like a 70-pound devil. Above me, Mount Suribachi loomed like a sleeping giant, its slopes honeycomb with caves where Japanese soldiers waited in the darkness. My name is Frank Morrison, and I was a Marine private first class with the 3rd Marine Division. It was March 15, 1945, and I was about to witness why the flamethrower became America's most feared weapon in the Pacific. The weight of the fuel tanks pressed against my spine as I adjusted the shoulder straps. 68 pounds of napalm mixture, gasoline thickened with polystyrene, enough liquid fire to reach out 150 feet and burn at nearly 2,000 degrees. In my hands, I held the wand that would decide whether we lived or died on this godforsaken island. Morrison, Sergeant Danny Kowalski's voice cut through the morning air like a blade. You and Peterson get ready. We got another cave complex up ahead, and these Japs ain't coming out for nothing. I nodded, my throat too dry to speak. Beside me, Corporal Jim Peterson checked his rifle one more time. Peterson was my cover man. His job was to keep enemy snipers off me while I worked the flame. We'd been doing this dance for 3 weeks now, ever since we'd hit the beach on February 19th. 3 weeks of hell on 8 square miles of volcanic rock. The Battle of Iwo Jima had been raging for nearly a month. What the brass told us would be a 5-day operation had turned into the bloodiest campaign in Marine Corps history. The Japanese had turned this island into a fortress, with over 11 miles of underground tunnels connecting 1,500 caves, bunkers, and pillboxes. General Tadamichi Kuribayashi had 22,000 defenders waiting for us, and they'd prepared to die in place. That's where we came in. The flamethrower teams. When rifle fire couldn't reach them, when grenades bounced harmlessly off cave walls, when artillery couldn't penetrate their underground labyrinths, we brought the fire. Listen up, Marines. Lieutenant Bradley gathered our 8-man assault team around him. His face was streaked with black sand and dried blood from a shrapnel cut across his cheek. Intelligence says there's at least 30 Japs holed up in this cave system. They got interlocking fields of fire covering the approach, machine gun nests at the entrance, rifle positions in the rocks above. He pointed toward a dark opening in the cliff face about 200 yards ahead. Even from this distance, I could see the glint of metal from gun barrels positioned in the shadows. Yamamoto's boys have been shooting up our advance for 2 days now. Every time we try to move forward, they cut us down. Air support can't touch them. Naval bombardment just bounces off that rock. So we're going the hard way. The hard way. That meant flame. Lieutenant Bradley continued his briefing. Morrison, your primary flame. Peterson covers. Jackson and Williams, your secondary flame team. The rest of us provide suppressing fire and security. I looked over at Jackson, another flamethrower operator. He was 19 years old, same as me, but he'd been doing this longer. His hands were steady as he checked his equipment. Mine were shaking. Remember, the lieutenant said, these caves go deep. Some connect to others. Clear each chamber completely before moving forward. And watch for spider holes. They like to pop up behind you. Spider holes. The Japanese had perfected the art of camouflaged fighting positions. A soldier could hide in a hole barely 3 feet deep, covered with a steel plate and sand, invisible until he opened fire from behind. We moved out in tactical formation, using the rough terrain for cover. The volcanic rock provided good concealment, but it also slowed our movement. Every step had to be calculated. Every shadow could hide a sniper. The morning sun beat down mercilessly. Despite being March, the temperature was already climbing toward 90 degrees. Inside my flamethrower tanks, the napalm mixture was heating up, creating pressure that would help propel the flame when I pulled the trigger. As we approached the cave complex, the geography became clear. The Japanese had chosen their position perfectly. The cave entrance sat at the base of a 30-foot cliff, with clear lines of sight in all directions. Above the entrance, natural rock formations provided perfect sniper positions. To the left and right, smaller caves and crevices offered additional defensive positions. Hold here, Lieutenant Bradley whispered as we took cover behind a line of rocks about 50 yards from the target. "Let me glass this place." He raised his binoculars and studied the enemy position for several minutes. I used the time to check my equipment one more time. The M2-2 flamethrower was a marvel of American engineering. 2 cylindrical tanks contained the fuel mixture, pressurized by a small nitrogen tank. The wand assembly included the trigger mechanism and the ignition system, a small pilot light that would ignite the fuel stream as it left the nozzle. The weapon had been developed specifically for Pacific theater operations. Traditional weapons couldn't reach enemies hiding deep in caves and bunkers. The flamethrower solved that problem with devastating effectiveness. The flame could reach around corners, flow into tight spaces, and most importantly, consume the oxygen inside enclosed areas. "I count at least 6 positions," Bradley reported. "Machine gun nest at the main entrance. 2 rifle positions up high, at least 3 more positions I can't quite make out. This is going to be a tough nut to crack." The plan was simple but dangerous. We'd approach from 2 directions under covering fire. Jackson's team would take the left flank while Peterson and I went straight up the middle. Once we were in position, we'd hit them with everything we had. Remember, Sergeant Kowalski added, "These Japs have been in those caves for weeks. They're hungry, thirsty, and scared. That makes them dangerous. Don't give them a chance to surrender. They won't take it anyway." That was the terrible reality of fighting the Japanese. Their warrior code, Bushido, demanded death before dishonor. Surrender was not an option. They would fight to the last man, which meant we had to kill every single one of them to secure the position. At 0800 hours, we began our approach. The covering fire opened up first. Marines with bars and M1 Garrons poured rounds into the cave entrance and surrounding positions. The volcanic rock exploded in puffs of dust and fragments as bullets struck home. But the Japanese didn't return fire immediately. They were waiting. Peterson and I low-crawled across 30 yards of open ground, using every depression and rock for cover. The flamethrower tanks scraped against the volcanic surface with each movement. Sweat poured down my face, stinging my eyes. My heart hammered so hard I was sure the Japanese could hear it. 20 yards from the cave entrance, they opened up. The machine gun chattered to life, sending 25 caliber bullets snapping overhead. Rifle fire erupted from the positions above us. Muzzle flashes winked from the darkness like deadly fireflies. "Stay down," Peterson yelled, returning fire with his M1. His rifle cracked steadily as he tried to suppress the enemy positions. I pressed myself against the volcanic rock, feeling the heat radiating up from the black sand. Bullets whined off the rocks around us, sending razor-sharp fragments spinning through the air. One cut across my left forearm, leaving a burning line of pain. From the left flank, I could hear Jackson's team engaging another position. His barman was laying down continuous fire, the heavy weapon chattering in long bursts. But the Japanese were well prepared. They'd had months to prepare these positions, and they knew every angle, every line of sight. "Morrison." Lieutenant Bradley's voice came over the radio. "Can you reach that machine gun nest?" I raised my head carefully and studied the cave entrance. The machine gun was positioned about 10 feet inside the cave mouth, behind a wall of sandbags and volcanic rock. The gunner was invisible, but I could see the muzzle flashes with each burst. The range was right at the edge of my weapon's effective distance. Maybe 140 feet, but I'd have to expose myself completely to get a clear shot. "I can reach it, sir. But I need covering fire." "You got it. On my mark." I shifted position, bringing the flamethrower wand up to firing position. My hands were steady now. Training had taken over. I'd practiced this dozens of times on the shooting ranges back in California, but this was different. This was real. Mark. Every Marine rifle opened up at once. The cave entrance disappeared in a storm of bullet impacts and rock fragments. I rose to a kneeling position, aimed the wand at the machine gun nest, and pulled the trigger. The ignition system sparked, and liquid fire erupted from the nozzle. A stream of burning napalm, orange and white and terrible, reached across the distance like the finger of God. It struck the sandbags around the machine gun position and splashed in all directions, coating everything with burning gel that stuck like glue and burned at 2,000 degrees. The machine gun fell silent immediately, but that was just the beginning. The napalm mixture flowed into the cave entrance like a river of fire. I could hear screaming from inside, terrible, inhuman sounds that would haunt my dreams for the rest of my life. The flame followed the cave's contours, reaching around corners and into spaces where bullets couldn't penetrate. "Keep it up," Peterson shouted. "Pour it in there." I held the trigger down, sending stream after stream of liquid fire into the cave system. The flamethrower's fuel supply would last for about 10 seconds of continuous firing, but those 10 seconds could clear out an entire cave complex. The screaming continued for perhaps 30 seconds, then gradually faded to silence. But we weren't done yet. "Secondary positions," Bradley called over the radio. "Hit the spider holes." That's when the real terror began. Japanese soldiers started popping up from concealed positions we hadn't even seen. Fighting holes camouflaged so perfectly they were invisible until the steel covers flew open and rifle barrels emerged. One opened up directly to our right, not 20 feet away. The soldier inside rose like a jack-in-the-box, his Arisaka rifle aimed directly at Peterson's head. I swung the flamethrower around and pulled the trigger without conscious thought. The soldier vanished in a burst of flame that lasted less than 2 seconds. But the image burned into my memory forever. A young man, maybe 17 years old, his face contorted with fear and determination, consumed by American fire. More positions revealed themselves. Jackson's team was hitting targets on the left flank, his flamethrower sending streams of burning napalm into cave mouths and fighting holes. The sound was like a blowtorch magnified 100 times, a roaring, whooshing noise that seemed to suck the air out of the world. "Cave entrance is clear," I called out. Moving forward, Peterson and I advanced toward the main cave opening. The napalm had done its work. The entrance was blackened and still smoking, with small flames flickering where the burning gel continued to consume anything combustible. Inside the cave, the destruction was complete. The machine gun position had been obliterated. Steel melted, wood charred to ash, sandbags reduced to smoking remnants. And the bodies, what remained of them, were burned beyond recognition. But caves on Iwo Jima were never simple. They connected to other caves, other tunnels, other fighting positions. We had to clear each chamber methodically. "Peterson, cover the entrance." "I'm going in." The cave system extended back into the cliff face for at least 50 feet. Side passages branched off the main tunnel. Each one had to be cleared with flame. I moved carefully, the flamethrower wand extended in front of me like a lance. The weapon's pilot light provided the only illumination in the darkness. Every shadow could hide an enemy soldier with a grenade or bayonet. In the first side chamber, I found 3 Japanese soldiers. They were alive but wounded, probably from the initial flame attack. One was trying to reload his rifle with hands burned so badly they could barely grip the ammunition. I pulled the trigger. The flame filled the chamber completely, reaching every corner, consuming the oxygen and everything else in its path. When it cleared, nothing moved. The second chamber was larger, with rifle positions cut into the walls. Evidence suggested at least 6 soldiers had been defending this position. My flamethrower reached every position, every hiding place, every corner where an enemy might wait in ambush. By the time we finished clearing the cave system, we'd eliminated an estimated 28 Japanese soldiers. Not one had surrendered. Not one had tried to retreat. They'd fought to the death, exactly as their warrior code demanded. But the cost was terrible to witness. The flamethrower was brutally effective, but it was also indiscriminate. It consumed everything: equipment, supplies, personal belongings, and human beings. In one chamber, I found photographs scattered among the ashes. Pictures of families back in Japan. Wives, children, parents who would never see their loved ones again. Position secure. Lieutenant Bradley reported over the radio. All enemy resistance eliminated. We'd accomplished our mission. The cave complex that had held up our advance for 2 days was now in American hands. But the victory felt hollow as I looked around at the destruction. "How much fuel you got left, Morrison?" Sergeant Kowalski asked. I checked my tanks. "Maybe 2 seconds worth. We'll need a resupply before the next objective." The next objective. There would always be a next objective on Iwo Jima. The island was 8 square miles of identical horror, caves, bunkers, fighting positions, all defended by soldiers who would rather die than surrender. That evening, as we regrouped for the night, I sat on a piece of volcanic rock and tried to process what I'd experienced. In a single morning, I'd killed more enemy soldiers than most Marines would encounter in their entire war. The flamethrower made it possible to eliminate large numbers of defenders quickly and efficiently. But efficiency in war always comes with a cost. Jackson sat down beside me, his own flamethrower propped against a rock. His hands were shaking now that the adrenaline had worn off. "How do you do it?" he asked quietly. "Now, keep going. Keep pulling that trigger." I thought about his question for a long time before answering. I think about the Marines who won't die because we cleared that cave. I think about the ships that won't get sunk because we took this island. I think about the invasion of Japan that might not happen because we broke their will to fight here. That was the strategic reality of Iwo Jima. This island would serve as a base for P-51 Mustangs escorting B-29 bombers to Japan. It would provide an emergency landing field for damaged bombers returning from raids on Japanese cities. Every cave we cleared, every position we took, brought the war closer to an end. But strategy was a luxury for officers and politicians. For us, it was simpler and more immediate. We used flamethrowers because they worked. When rifles couldn't reach the enemy, when grenades couldn't penetrate their defenses, when artillery couldn't touch their underground positions, flame could reach them anywhere. The M2-2 flamethrower had a maximum range of 150 feet. It could fire for 8 to 10 seconds continuously. The napalm mixture burned at temperatures hot enough to melt steel. Most importantly, it consumed oxygen, which meant even enemies who escaped the flame itself often suffocated in the superheated air. It was a weapon designed specifically for the kind of warfare we faced in the Pacific. Island-hopping campaigns against an enemy who had turned every cave, every bunker, every fighting hole into a tomb for American soldiers. The statistics were staggering. During the Battle of Iwo Jima, flamethrower teams eliminated an estimated 3,500 Japanese soldiers from cave and bunker positions. Without these weapons, the battle would have lasted months longer and cost thousands more American lives. But statistics couldn't capture the human cost of wielding such a weapon. Over the next 2 weeks, Peterson and I cleared dozens more cave systems. We became specialists in underground warfare, experts in using flame to reach enemies that conventional weapons couldn't touch. Our technique improved with experience. We learned to read cave systems, to anticipate where defenders would position themselves, to use the terrain to our advantage. We also learned to live with what we'd done. On March 26, 1945, Iwo Jima was declared secure. After 36 days of fighting, American forces controlled every square foot of the island. The cost was enormous, nearly 7,000 Americans killed and 20,000 wounded. But we'd eliminated the entire Japanese garrison of 22,000 soldiers. The flamethrower teams had played a crucial role in this victory. We'd cleared over 400 cave systems, eliminated thousands of enemy soldiers, and broken the back of Japanese resistance. Our weapons had proven decisive in the kind of close quarters, underground fighting that characterized Pacific theater operations. But victory on Iwo Jima meant more than just another island captured. It meant American bombers now had a base halfway between the Mariana Islands and Japan. It meant damaged B-29s had a place to land instead of ditching in the Pacific. It meant the home islands of Japan were now within easy reach of American air power. Most importantly, it demonstrated to the Japanese high command that their most elaborate defenses could be overcome by American determination and superior firepower. The myth of Japanese invincibility, already damaged at Midway and Guadalcanal, was completely shattered on the volcanic slopes of Iwo Jima. As I prepared to leave the island, I took one last look at Mount Suribachi. The American flag still flew from its summit, planted there by Marines on February 23rd in one of the most famous photographs of the war. But I knew the real victory hadn't happened on that mountaintop. It happened in hundreds of caves and tunnels, where American flamethrower teams had faced an enemy willing to defer every foot of ground. The M2W2 flamethrower had given us the ability to reach that enemy wherever he hid. When bullets failed, flame answered. When conventional weapons couldn't penetrate enemy defenses, liquid fire could flow around corners, through openings, into every space where Japanese soldiers waited in the darkness. It was a terrible weapon, designed for a terrible war against an enemy who fought by different rules than we did. But it was also the weapon that ended Japanese resistance on Iwo Jima and brought American victory one step closer. 45 years later, I still dream about those caves. I still hear the roar of the flamethrower, still smell the acrid smoke of burning napalm, still see the faces of young Japanese soldiers consumed by American fire. War leaves scars that never fully heal, memories that remain vivid long after the battles are over. But I also remember the Marines who lived because we cleared those caves. I remember the bombers that landed safely because we took that island. I remember the invasion of Japan that never happened because we broke their will to resist in places like Iwo Jima. The flamethrower was America's answer to Japanese tunnel warfare. It was brutal, it was effective, and it was necessary. When the enemy chose to fight from caves and bunkers, when they refused to surrender, when conventional weapons couldn't reach them, we brought the fire. And fire, in the end, was what won the war in the Pacific. Today, flamethrowers are banned by international treaty. The weapon that helped win World War II is now considered too inhumane for modern warfare. But in 1945, on a volcanic island 8,000 miles from home, facing an enemy who had sworn to die rather than surrender, it was the tool that broke Japanese resistance and saved American lives. I carried that flamethrower for 36 days on Iwo Jima. It weighed 68 pounds, could fire for 10 seconds continuously, and had a maximum range of 150 feet. But its real power wasn't in the statistics. Its real power was in what it represented: American industrial might, American technological superiority, and American determination to win the war no matter what the cost. When bullets failed, flame answered. And in answering, it wrote the final chapter of Japanese resistance in the Pacific theater of World War II. The boys who fought on Iwo Jima are old men now, and many have passed on. But their legacy lives in the victory they achieved on that sulfur island, and in the weapon that made that victory possible. The flamethrower may have been a tool of war, but in the hands of American Marines, it became an instrument of liberation, freeing the world from an enemy who would accept nothing less than total victory or total defeat. We gave them defeat, delivered at 2,000 degrees and 150 feet of range. And in doing so, we brought the war in the Pacific one step closer to its end.